Welcome back to Second Breakfast and our ongoing coverage of A Game of Thrones, bringing you the best thoughts, theories, and literary analysis this side of Westeros.
It has been a minute since we've seen Sansa. Poor girl.
Many minutes, many months even.
A long time.
Yeah, I loved this chapter.
Oh, did you?
As a little preview, there's a lot of dream and prophecy stuff in this chapter.
Oh, yeah.
Which is usually Maggie's corner. That's what she's
It's still
going to
be my corner. Spoiler. That's what it's going to be for me.
I'm going to talk about it a bit too.
Ooh.
So there's something for you to look forward to.
Well, that's very exciting.
What happened in this chapter, Maggie? Sansa number 3, reminders, spoilers for everything.
Yes, this is Sansa number 3. I'm surprised you liked this one, because normally you don't like Sansa. You're not a fan of hers, as is the case for many people.
Absence makes the heart grow fonder.
I am a huge Sansa stan. I will always be a Sansa apologist, even though she is objectively horrible in this chapter. I understand her and I feel for her. Okay.
I love the way she's written.
Me too. It's so good. Okay, so this is, of course, Sansa number 3. Sansa is eating dinner with Jane Poole, her, best friend, I guess, and she's telling her all about the day at court that she just witnessed. This is when Ned was presiding over everything and sitting on the throne, so she just watched that, so she's recapping for Jane. And Sansa is surprised that Ned didn't send Sir Loras Tyrell to go and kill the Mountain, because Sansa thinks that, it would have made the most sense. It's like in the songs, he looks like the perfect knight. He's so pretty and young, and she's also, I forget who she's talking about. Oh, it's Beric Dondarrion, I think. She says, he's so old and he's 22.
Also, he's 22.
Crazy. 22. Yeah, this world is wild. Anyway.
He's at least double that in the show.
Yeah, for sure.
He's a silver fox.
Yeah, but imagine them sending a 22-year-old kid to do this. That's crazy.
To kill the mountain?
To kill the mountain. Okay.
A 22-year-old couldn't scale the mountain.
No, certainly not. So she and Jane basically are just chatting, and they kind of wander around. They steal some strawberry pie from the kitchens. They're just giggling and having...
Cold strawberry pie. What did we think? Sorry to do a food aside. What did we think of cold strawberry
Kim,
pie?
You've had cold strawberry pie that my mother has made for you. Don't you remember?
And I loved that one. Thank you for cornering me there.
But it's made
that
with
was the one with the chocolate base?
Yeah. But it's like
good.
a Jell-O pie almost. I don't think they have Jell-O here.
Reading Game of Thrones, I was not picturing a chocolate base for this one.
No, it's true. I wonder what that was like. But anyway, they're having a...
Were you jealous? Usually we're jealous of the crust of bread and
I love the way they
grease.
describe all the food in this book,
but
even if it's gross. Yeah, I wanted
cold
it.
Strawberry pie.
I wanted to eat it.
Okay.
Not as much as I want to eat lemon cakes. I love when they talk about those lemon cakes.
Now, tell me, why? That's a different fruit dessert. Why did that one speak to you more?
We're going to go on a big tangent. Here's the thing about
It's
fruit.
our fucking podcast.
Here's the thing about fruit for me. I don't like chunks of fruit and stuff. It really freaks me out. When I was a kid,
it's scary.
The only flavors of yogurt I could eat were vanilla, lemon, and key lime pie. That was the only yogurt I could eat, because
we really were meant for each other.
Because there was no chunks. I don't like the chunks that make me... So the strawberry pie my mother makes, it's pureed, so there's no chunks. There's the occasional chunk, which I eat around because I can't handle it. Things like lemon, there are no chunks of lemon because you just use the juice and the zest. And so there are no chunks. So it's a chunk-free dessert. So lemon cake sounds delicious.
Chunk-free.
For example, blueberry pie, absolutely not. Cherry pie, disgusting. I can't have the mushy, gushy fruit pieces.
It's a good song, though.
Now, the one exception is peach. I love a good peach cobbler. The chunks of peach are totally acceptable.
Here, allow me to go on a tangent within a tangent. Do we cobble any other types of fruit?
There's blueberry cobbler, yes, but
really?
I don't like it because of what I just described.
Now, what are you picturing for a cobbler?
You could do a blackberry cobbler.
Because I just have a static VHS screen in my head when I try to conjure
in my head,
a cobbler.
A cobbler is basically a deconstructed pie. It's like a casserole version of a pie. So it's
the
all the same
stuff.
There's always some kind of crust underneath or something, and there's stuff on top as well. It's more crumbly and it's more fall apart.
Is there a lattice though on top?
No, that's more
the
pie.
Crust?
That's more pie.
What's the one with the crumbly?
That's like a cobbler.
Let me go on a tangent within a tangent within a tangent.
Oh my God.
Fuck shepherd's pie.
Yeah, fuck shepherd's pie. That's not pie.
No.
That's a casserole with mashed potatoes on top.
How could you ruin
Where's the crust?
The best British entree.
You cannot tell me that something is a pie when there's not a single pie crust to be found.
Oh, good. Here, let me tie this back to Game of Thrones. When I was doing the Shakespeare thing at Oxford.
Yep.
Where I first read Game of Thrones and listened to it, walking on the cobble. I've told this story.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
We were in a little town looking at Churchill's grave or tombstone or whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
And we went to this little place and we got little meat pies.
Uh-huh.
And there was a woman who bustled them out to us. And there was a little heart of dough on top of the meat pie.
Very
and it was
sweet.
amazing. And if that had been shepherd's pie, if she'd given me some mashed potato bullshit on the top of that, I like a clown, you got to throw it right back in their face.
Sure, yeah. Well, okay, if you don't like shepherd's pie, if you're like us and you know that it's I don't know, it's a violation, please leave a comment below.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week.
Next week we're going to talk about other fruit desserts. Get excited.
If you want more bullshit like this, check out the Patreon.
Genuinely though, I can't the fruit junks, I can't do it.
No,
Okay.
I know.
Anyway, so they're eating strawberry pie.
Uh-huh.
And the next morning is breakfast time. More food. Hooray. And so Sansa's eating breakfast and Arya is there. And basically they have a fight, as they always do. And the fight involves a blood orange. And Sansa is so mad that she says that they should have killed Arya instead of Lady. And then she runs to her room. I mean, I'm just thinking about when I was 11. That's like about when you start to get really, really mean. You say some mean, nasty things when you start to enter puberty and your brain starts to really change. That's why middle school is such a viper pit. Right. So I get it. I mean, I don't think I ever once told my sister that I wish she were dead. Like, I never went that far as a child, but I said some pretty mean things. So I get it.
Did you ever
Sansa.
have a dog murdered?
No.
Okay.
So maybe if I had, it might have led me to do that. Anyway, so Septa Mordain sends both Arya and Sansa to their rooms, and Sansa gets back to her room. Her dress is ruined from the orange. She's crying, and she like Disney princesses on the bed and falls asleep. And she has a dream, and so in the dream, Lady, her dog who's dead, is there, and they're kind of running through the woods together, but she can't really remember the rest. But then she wakes up, and she's been called to go to her father's chambers, and Arya is there too. And Ned is like basically talking to them, and they start talking about the fight. Sansa's like, Arya started it, blah, blah, blah. And Ned says, hey, like, we're not talking about this right now. I'm sending you back to King's Landing because, like, we're actually in danger, and stop arguing about stupid stuff. Like, grow up. But Sansa doesn't want to leave. She loves King's Landing. She wants to marry Joffrey. She doesn't want to go back to Winterfell. And so she's like very, very upset, begging to stay. And then she very like importantly, significantly says, I'm going to give Joffrey a son with golden hair. And she says that Joffrey is nothing like that King Robert. And then Ned has his own little private...
What?
Yeah. He has his own moment of like, out of the mouth of babes.
Yeah,
and he's
the
like...
record scratch?
Yeah, he's having his like eureka moment. And Sansa's just like, I want to marry Joffrey. Like, she has no idea.
Yeah.
And so Ned says that Arya and Sansa are going to go take a ship as soon as possible to get back to Winterfell. And Sansa feels that her life is ending, and Arya tries to reassure Sansa. Arya's actually being very nice in this scene. And she's like, it'll be an adventure. We'll get to go see Robb and Bran and Hodor. And Sansa's so mad that she says, you should marry Hodor. You're just like him. You're stupid and hairy and ugly. And then she leaves, and that's the end of the chapter.
She really, maybe I'm turning around on Sansa. This reread, because I really enjoyed this chapter. I love the way she's written.
It's so perfect. Like, I understand her so deeply, even though I obviously don't agree with the choices she's making or the way she thinks about things. And she is pretty stupid in many ways.
But that doesn't matter in fiction.
No, it doesn't. Like, I really enjoy her as a character.
Yeah. So I think we're going to hit on some similar themes here, but I think I'll lay out mine first, and then you can clean up the mess and talk about dreams.
I'm looking forward to it.
In the measured, structured way that we've all come to expect. So I'm immediately jumping off what we talked about last time with Ned. And we were both kind of working with this idea of Ned being already dead. And being, we called him like King of the Afterlife in the thumbnail on the YouTube version.
He also looks like a ghost. He's wearing all white. We talked all about
some Macbeth. We had fun last week.
It was a good time.
And I think we're continuing that trend, that idea in this chapter of Ned's sort of living death, in that most of the chapter here, he's out of the picture. He does appear later on, but to no avail. So he's out of the picture at the beginning here, and it's Sansa talking about him in the same way you might tell a story about someone after they're dead. There's an interesting, like, notable absence of Ned in the beginning of this chapter. It wasn't conscious eulogizing, but I got that feel of it a little bit.
Interesting.
And the thing I noticed is that Sansa was talking about her father as though he was impotent and irrelevant. And the thing I clocked with her, because I love the way George presents these things and then we get to pick up on them. He doesn't feel the need to look at the camera and tell us, oh, it's interesting that Sansa, he doesn't, he lets us do that part.
Sure.
And the thing that really stuck out to me here is that Sansa thinks even if her father is impotent, irrelevant, and completely out of the picture, that she'll be okay She thinks she'll be fine. She'll be accepted and still have this noble path of marrying the prince and becoming the queen.
She's really separated herself from her father and the rest of her family. She doesn't think of herself as a Stark at all.
But also reality. She still thinks she would have standing and a purpose of value at court without Ned being the living hand of the king.
Yeah, she's got no idea. She's incredibly naive in this way.
But underpinning that naivete, and I want to play with that with a sympathetic lens. Obviously, we have fun and goof around, but I do have a sympathy for her, absolutely, in this chapter. The thing that underpins those beliefs is this rock-solid belief in right and wrong and justice, where she doesn't want... She makes this interesting observation in the chapter where she says, it's not fair to blame Joffrey for how his family's acting. Yes, all of my dad's bannermen were killed, but that was mean Uncle Jaime. That wasn't... You can't blame Joffrey for that. That would be like blaming me for something bad that Arya did. So I do love that there is already this sort of sketch of a moral code that is underpinning her logic here. It makes her a Stark, I think, very clearly.
Okay.
The way she talks about the heroism of Loras fighting the mountain. She doesn't get into the logistics of how talented a swordsman Loras is, how experienced on the battlefield he is compared to the mountain. It's just that in the fairy tale logic, with like very strong, clear moral binaries, he's the young, beautiful hero, and here's the big bad guy. So that's who you send up against the big bad guy, and he'll win.
Right, and I remember she's thinking about the guys on the Night's Watch who came down to talk to Ned at court, and she's like, they didn't look like knights and heroes. They were like ugly and dirty, and that
Which
sucks.
means bad. We've talked about this before in the context of Disney movies when we were kids, or the Dursleys in Harry Potter, where anyone who is overweight or ugly, those people, in the same way Ursula in Little Mermaid, that was always a narrative shorthand for someone being evil.
Right.
Obviously, there are problems with that shorthand.
Just a few, yeah.
But it's interesting that is the type of childish fairy tale logic that I think most kids start with, especially watching those Disney movies.
And when you grow up either with Disney movies or these like romantic songs talking about these beautiful heroes who look the part, and the villains are evil and ugly and monstrous. Like, of course she's going to think that. And
that's fascinating to graft on top of this world that with every passing page becomes more gray and nuanced and complex. I mean, we talked about last week the Lannisters being absolute evil and the Starks being absolute good. But at the same time, how many chapters have we had with Tyrion?
Right.
And we wouldn't characterize him as absolute evil.
No, right.
So there is this growing complexity, and I have such sympathy for Sansa's kind of starting position of that childhood fairy tale logic. But I really took to how she positions Ned within that framework, because he's the one who stops Loras from being sent out to fight the mountain. So Ned is the impediment. Ned is almost an antagonist.
Yeah, he's stopping the song from coming true.
Right. So immediately I think that poses a question. This is sort of a branching path that I wanted to play with you. Is this a rebuke of Ned's moral code and mission here, or validation of his idealism?
Ooh, I think for her it's the second one. I think she is the extreme version of Ned's idealistic view of the world. And so I think like she takes it so far that Ned no longer belongs to it. Like, he doesn't get to be a member of that club anymore. I think that's what it is.
Because last chapter, we made this spirited argument that Ned was making a heroic, idealistic sacrifice in the name of the good, right? Ignoring the political ramifications of sending people to kill the mountain and strip him of his titles. That is going to be ruinous for the family, even if it worked and he didn't die and all this other shit.
Sure.
That would invite a mountain of trouble. No pun intended. I didn't mean that. I deeply apologize.
Sure.
That would invite a whole mess upon him, but he's doing it because it's the right thing.
I see. Yeah.
Do we view that as being naive in the same way we view Sansa's, what we just called a minute ago, naivete of this childhood fairy tale logic?
Well, yeah, again, no, because we talked about this last week where I said, it's very easy to think of Ned the way we think of Sansa, as being very naive, overly simplistic in his worldview, and that's what leads to his death. I don't think that's what's happening with Ned. I think in the last chapter, he is doing his best to do what he thinks is right, but he's still being, like, smart. Like, again, I think he's doing a pretty good job. I don't honestly think that him sending somebody to kill the mountain is necessarily the wrong thing to do. I think it's a
No,
proportionate.
I think it's totally the right thing
It's
to
a
do.
but as in like in terms of consequences, I think it's a proportionate response, and I think that it's like a message to the Lannisters to say like, hey, don't, like, he doesn't want them to just be able to step all over him. So of course he's gonna respond and retaliate in some way, in a way that then protects the Tullys as well. That's his whole point.
It's not the tactically smart thing. That's what I meant.
No, I'm saying I think it is though.
He's sort of
Like what else?
endangered
What else
right
would
now.
he do though?
I think you could hedge and try to deal with it on an interpersonal level with Tywin instead of putting out a hit on one of his bannermen in public and denouncing him and implicating Tywin. I think the smart, more savvy finger to the wind, Littlefinger kind of thing to do would have been dealing with it publicly, privately.
Privately, I see, yeah. Well, again, I think his goal here is to try to, like, when he's got this position of power, to try his very best to let his system of morality play out as best as it can.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's smart. Well, it's not smart. It's just. It's not smart. But this is what I'm trying to play with, because Ned's moral binary of the good and the bad, the right and the wrong, we don't view that as being naive or childish.
No.
But when we slightly change the wording and put it in Sansa's mouth, it does feel almost silly. When we talk about the heroic versus the wicked, if you give it that little aplomb of like high fantasy, that veneer, it does seem somehow naive.
That's true. And you could, like, on the one hand say, well, Ned is more aware of things. He's more aware of the tragedies of the world. But it's not that Sansa's unaware. The whole, her first chapter when she's with Joffrey and they're off, hunting together, eating lunch, she firsthand experiences how nasty Joffrey is. And she's like aware of it, and it's like really confusing her. And then she sees all the stuff with Micah, and she sees, Lady is killed. And then even when she's at the tournament, she loves the tournament. It's this beautiful, like, romantic, song-like experience. And even now she remembers it as being this beautiful experience. But at the same time, she saw Joffrey completely ignoring her and being shitty to her. And then she had that experience with the Hound that absolutely terrified her. So it's like, even despite this exposure she's had to, quote unquote, the real world, like the tragedies and horrors of everything in her actual reality, she's still clinging to this this mentality, this hope that things will be perfect and beautiful and play out in the just way that they should. And I think that's kind of what Ned is doing too. So I think they're kind of doing the same thing. Sansa's just feels more extreme.
Yeah, and I'm going to get to that point in a minute. I'm glad you kind of previewed it here. But I do think this is the central tension of the chapter, is forcing us to zoom out and compare and contrast these moral binaries. And see, is Ned that different from a 12-year-old girl? There's something interestingly objective going on there.
I see.
And while we're doing all that parsing and comparing, there's kind of a Trojan horse thing. I want to lay this track so I can hit it later. Do we dismiss Sansa's other beliefs because this central wicked versus the heroic seems so silly and dismissible? Because the way she talks about, well, everyone knows dreams are prophetic. Even ignoring what we know from Fire and Blood and House of the Dragon and all that shit, I dismiss that because she's pretending to be an adult, right? She's doing the thing kids do when they want to be accepted by the adults.
Right.
So you go with all of this conventional wisdom and you drop all these platitudes that you don't even understand. Like, I sympathize with her position.
Right. You've heard adults say these things, so you say them too, because it feels like the right thing to do.
But you don't understand them. You don't mean them. It's just what you say to be included. And I think there's an interesting kind of Trojan horse thing there, because it kind of pricks our ears to think about dreams. Because we know in the same moment where she says, well, of course everyone knows dreams are prophetic, there's a moment like 2 pages before where she demonstrates, when she tells Jane that she had this dream about Joffrey touching the white heart, the stupid stag doe thing from House of the Dragon. She's demonstrated that sometimes these dreams are wishes, which is what she calls it. She said the dream was more of a wish. It wasn't a dream. The dream sounds better as a story.
Right.
So we know that dreams can be sometimes wishes or lies. But there's something kind of nagging and true about her calling them prophetic. So in the same, we kind of muddy the waters. We've got some tension. We've got some red herrings and pulls in both directions. I love that. I love the complication of this chapter. And so much of that is between the lines.
Right.
Because reading it straight, we're basically just getting Sansa's reflections on watching her dad do his job. But in between, on an analytical level, there's so much happening here.
Right. Well, and she's sort of like trying to force her own beliefs into her own reality. Like she's trying to morph it into what she wants it to be, because she knows she didn't have a deeply prophetic dream about Joffrey. She has a hope about what he would do, but she turns it into a prophetic dream. Like that's what she's doing, is she's trying so hard to turn her life into this song. She's trying to turn it into a fairy tale because that's what she believes she's owed. And so she's doing her very best to make it happen. Like Sansa, as foolish as she is and as misguided as she is, she's not passive. She doesn't just lie down and let things happen to her. She tries really, really hard to make things work out. The way she goes about it is not always the best way, and it hurts other people in the process, but she is a very active participant in her life, and she never just like lies down and lets things happen around her. I mean, her abilities, like her capabilities and agency is very limited at many times because of her age and station. And then of course, after Ned dies, she's just a captive of the Lannisters, but she is trying really hard and trying to be active here. So that's what's happening here by her turning her wish into this prophetic dream. It's really interesting.
Yes, the chapter is a series of emotional set pieces. And I think a good way to make sense of these sort of abstractions that you and I are playing with is to zoom in on one of these scenes. And I want to talk about the last scene, which is Ned gathering together Arya and Sansa and saying, "Hey,
Arya?
Sorry, I tripped
What
over.
on
my,
earth was that? Arya.
I was thinking about the shepherd's pie. I got flustered. And Ned says, "I'm sending you home. This place is not safe anymore, so you're on the next boat back to Winterfell." And I was very intrigued by this because it provoked immediately like 4 different thoughts. And I love that level of efficiency. Again, this chapter, 5 or 6 pages, and there's so much. I mean, it's half an hour of us talking about it just to make sense of it. My immediate thought was, damn, this happens way too late. Kind of a knock on his parenting, right?
Yeah, okay. Like him sending them back, you mean?
Yeah, you know, maybe the same day all of your bannermen are slaughtered in the street, you get the kids out of there.
Well, he does. I remember, you're right. I remember he does ask his bannermen, the ones he still has, to like protect them and stuff, but it's weird that he doesn't like immediately send them back.
Or maybe before that. Like there are 3 or 4 incidents when the childhood pet is slaughtered. You know, like there are many.
Why'd you keep going, bud? That's the moment where you go, you know what? Never mind. We're going to go back home.
Why this line in the sand?
Yeah.
So that's my immediate thought, is sort of another knock against Ned and his virtue and wisdom.
He's not hasty enough. Yeah.
But then the second one, I can't help but zoom ahead because I've read this book and I've seen the show so many times. And I immediately reflect on the idea that, hey, none of this ever happens.
Right.
They don't get sent home and saved and spared from all the hell that's about to break loose here. So that serves, again, that pulls us back to this idea of Ned's living death and his ongoing impotence and irrelevance.
Yeah, because, I see. Like he's so dead at this point that anything he's planning is not going to happen.
It's a wish. It's nothing. It's air. And then I tease out the hypothetical of, hey, what if I didn't know the spoilers of what's going to happen? How would this have worked? If we send Arya and Sansa home, is Winterfell suddenly this bastion stronghold at the end of the world where it's Robb, Bran, Arya, and Sansa?
And Catelyn, I guess she'll get there too eventually.
Eventually, maybe.
Yeah, right.
No. Would that have saved any of them from the horrors on the horizon?
No, I mean, I think... Because, like, if you think about Clash of Kings, that's when, like, the war is really broken out and Robb is, leading the charge. So the war is not taking place at Winterfell. He goes and meets the Lannisters out on the battlefield. But I think if, like, Arya and Sansa had been at Winterfell, they probably would have tried to take it. They probably would have tried to capture them. They probably would have tried to attack it. Like, because they're lucky in that in Clash of Kings, the Lannisters have Sansa as a hostage,
yes,
like as a bargaining chip against Robb. But so they would have tried to make that happen anyway. I mean, they would have been a little safer probably, and Arya wouldn't be stranded in the fucking wilderness, but still.
But there's this idea that the goose is already cooked, that everyone is already screwed, because even if Ned hadn't died, let's say he outsmarted that, Robert's already on the hunt where he's going to be killed. So let's play that out for a second. If Robert dies, Joffrey becomes king. In no world does Joffrey keep Ned as Hand of the King.
No.
But Cersei knows too much from all the spy masters that have watched Ned visit Robert's bastards. She'll understand the recessive traits thing before before Ned does.
Well, and she already knows the truth. So
Ned's already, I mean, his leg's screwed up.
Yep.
And he knows things that he can't know. So he's kind of already dead. But even if he does survive, the Lannisters are even more in power, and all of Winterfell is already on their shit list.
Yeah, no, they would have found him and killed him in some other way.
Yeah,
it is way, way, way too late. We are past the point of no return.
And that's where, when I'm at kind of rock bottom, I'm hit with the fourth observation here. And it's a distillation echo within this one chapter. And
cool.
when George does that, it's when he's hitting an idea so strongly that he's not even letting it fester and percolate and marinate in between two chapters. He's hitting it hard a bunch of times within the same set of pages. And it's this idea that you and I have already teased out over the last few weeks about denying narrativity.
Oh, okay.
Sansa notices these bookends. That's always a thing with distillation echoes here. They're so overt that the characters usually clock them. And Sansa notices these kind of bookends of this chapter, which... I almost just made up a word that I'm not even going to... I was combining... Oh, I don't know.
Wow. Okay. Rewind.
Take two.
Yep, you got it.
Sansa calls out these bookends of narrativity that's being denied. This chapter begins with a gallant knight, Loras, being denied his rightful quest.
Okay.
And then it ends with a noble lady, Sansa, being exiled from court and wronged and taken away from her betrothed prince.
Oh, okay. So she also doesn't get to live out her beautiful song.
Right.
Yeah.
And she notices those two denials of narrativity because they specifically contradict her ideal. And the moral binary that I just talked about that she has inherited from these songs that she's been told from Septim Ordain and the old lady at Winterfell, all of these heroic ideals. Old Nan, thank you.
Yeah.
But she's less troubled, like you were talking about before, by all the other horrors she's seen since she came here. She can kind of brush those off, dismiss them. Those are flukes. Those are accidents. Shit happens.
Yeah, they're not part of my song, right?
The king being a drunken, deficient loser, she can kind of brush that off. The murder of her direwolf, shit happens. All of her father's bannermen being killed in the street, that's not as much of a moral affront to her and her vision of life and her future as Loras not getting to kill the mountain and her not getting to stay in King's Landing.
What do you make of her ignoring Joffrey's obvious flaws?
Same thing. That's something she dismisses as a fluke, an accident, shit happens, because she has this overarching principle. She has a path. She has a 5-year plan.
I'm going to marry the prince. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And whatever problem of evil, she's not as shaped by the exposure to the problem of evil as 100 other characters we've seen so far.
That's
true. She can ignore a lot of that if it defies her kind of vision quest here.
Yeah, because she even says, I don't want someone brave and gentle. I want him. She acknowledges that Joffrey is not the right kind of guy, but she doesn't care because that doesn't go along with her path.
Exactly. And this is where I kind of jump into your territory for a second. I think this is a testament to the power of the stories we tell ourselves, the delusions, the ideal futures that we map out and we tell ourselves are going to happen so many times that it becomes a certainty in our heads.
Yes.
And in a more literal, almost metaphorical, non-supernatural sense,
I see.
the dreams that we have and convince ourselves of. There's almost I'm using the word kind of wrong, but there's almost like a secular version of dreams.
Okay.
It's the normal conversational metaphorical version of dreams instead of supernatural Helena, beast within the boards.
I see.
It's this conversational level of dreaming.
Almost like your hopes, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, your aspirations.
And that's how I make sense of Sansa in this chapter. It's that rock solid belief, that blinding belief in the dreams we have for ourselves.
Yes, and that's what really guides her. And like I said earlier, that's what makes her such an active participant in her own life, is she is very much guided by these dreams. I'm really glad you've laid this out because as I hinted at, and as I'm sure you would come to expect, I did a lot of thinking about dreams in this chapter because they were so there and so present. And because she's I'm starting with her saying to her friend Jane, everyone knew that dreams were prophetic. And again, by saying it like that, it feels so, the first line of Pride and Prejudice, it's a truth universally acknowledged, this almost
platitude.
Yeah, this sarcastic, almost like the humorous way. Like it's a very funny sentence. Like the point is that of course it's not actually true, but it's what everybody believes, and so you just go with it. And that's kind of what Sansa is thinking, is that, because like you said, it's two parts. She knows that the thing that she's wishing for was not a dream that she had, but she so badly wants it to be true. She so badly wants it to be prophetic that she makes it so. Even though she knows that that's not true, she's doing it anyway. So that's how she's thinking about the world. And she says, I had a dream that Joffrey would be the one to take the wild heart, and it had been more of a wish actually, but it sounded better to call it a dream. That's what she says in her head. And she also says, it also says, in her heart, she knew that her gallant prince was worthier than his drunken father. So in her heart. So she's thinking about this. Again, it's like, it's this wish, it's this dream within her. This other wish she has. She says to Ned, we'll be ever so happy, just like in the songs, you'll see. I'll give him a son with golden hair. So again, it's this wish, this hope, this dream that she has within herself.
And prophecy.
Well, exactly.
Interesting.
Because she also says he's not the least bit like that old drunken king.
Yeah.
And so Sansa seems to have like what feels to her like this instinctual, unequivocal knowledge of how things are or how things should be. She's going to marry Joffrey. She's going to have this perfect life. She's going to give him all of these sons. She's going to be queen. She's going to have this beautiful life. Her life's going to be like the songs. And she is creating her own prophecy. Like that's how active a role she's taking. And what's interesting is that we know that none of this is true. She's not going to marry the prince, and it's not going to be perfect and beautiful and amazing. And she's not going to give him these beautiful sons. But in so many ways, everything she like prophesies here is true. And so I'm going to kind of break that down. Like it's true in a way that she is not hoping for. But I think everything she sort of states out loud comes true in a way. So the biggest one is that she says Joffrey would be the one to take the White Hart. Remember last week when I talked about the hunt and I talked about Ned as this White Hart, and how the whole scene in that chapter is like this sort of prophecy being laid out, all the blood present in the chapter basically saying like Ned is this one being hunted by the Lannisters and by extension Robert. Like while they're out hunting a literal White Hart, Ned is the metaphorical White Hart,
and he's dressed in monochrome on
white.
The throne.
So he's the one who's going to be hunted and killed, or is already being hunted and killed. And so it says Joffrey will be the one to take the White Hart. We know Joffrey is the one who orders the death of Ned.
Damn. Yeah.
Sir Ilyn, bring me his head. Like it's Joffrey. I mean, it's Ilyn Payne who literally kills Ned, but it's because of Joffrey.
Sure.
And so that of course comes true. And Sansa thinks to herself, he's not the least bit like that old drunken king. Obviously not. He is not Robert's son. He is not a Baratheon at all. So that's really true, right? And she even says, like, it's all going to be perfect and it's going to be great. And like, yeah, that's not going to be perfect and great, but she's going to stay behind at King's Landing and remain betrothed to Joffrey, and that's going to remain true. So she has these deep hopes within herself that she turns into prophecy for herself and thinks about and is dreaming about. But then I wanted to think about the actual dream that she has, because the thing about Joffrey, everything she's stating are not dreams that she's had literally, at least not that we've seen on the page. But we do see her have an actual dream here. So I wanted to break that down too. Her dream is that Lady was with her and they were running together, and trying to remember was like trying to catch the rain with her fingers. The dream faded and Lady was dead again. So I was trying to figure out what this could mean. Not a lot happens in this dream. It's very quick because she can't remember most of it. But I want to focus on, she's with Lady, they're running, the dream fades, and then Lady is dead. And I don't quite know what this means. I have some possibilities, and I'm curious what you think. One could be like simply, like a simple interpretation is that like Lady running through the woods, Sansa will also run away at some point. I genuinely can't remember when in the story she escapes King's Landing, but we know that she does escape at some point. Do you remember what happens?
Like, for Sansa?
Yeah, how does she get out of there?
I don't know.
It's not for a while. But so there's that.
Ask me again 2 years from now.
Yeah, great. Oh my God. Yeah, so that's a simple interpretation. Or maybe it's more like her future is ambiguous and not yet determined. She can't remember what's happening in the dream, meaning she can't really see ahead of herself. I don't know. Maybe it's that her dreams, again, and dreams in the way you stated, like these hopes she has for her future, maybe it's that they will fade, because it says the dream faded and Lady was dead again. And so...
Sort of like how that fairy tale childhood logic fades as you get more experience and exposure to the world.
So maybe it's something like that. But I also wanted to think about right before she recaps the dream, it's in this state where she's waking up. The narration says, "For a moment, it was as if the dire wolf was there in the room, looking at her with those golden eyes, sad and knowing." And I think that's the key. We talked about the dire wolves as being sort of these prophetic counterparts to their, respective Stark children, and being sort of
omens,
exactly what their life will be like and how they'll experience the world. And so her eyes are sad and knowing. So if we think about this, thinking about the idea of knowledge, Sansa's future is
sad knowledge.
She will come to know the sad realities of the world more and more as her story goes on. We've already established she already knows them now, but is sort of rejecting them or pushing past them or excusing them. And as her story goes on, she will accept those realities more and more, which is very sad. And in a very key way, we learned that Littlefinger had said to Sansa earlier on in this chapter, "Life is not a song. You may learn that one day to your sorrow." Sorrow, sad, learn, knowledge. She's going to know the real truth of the world, and it's going to be incredibly sad for her. And so I think I don't have an exact interpretation of what this dream means, but it's more that understanding the dream and the way Sansa thinks about the world helps us understand her character and what's going to happen. And I think we can think about it as all of these things, these dreams, prophecy, and songs and hopes that Sansa has, they're all twisted into something sad and eventually dead, because Lady is dead. Lady, when Sansa wakes up, she remembers that Lady is dead. The dream has ended. Lady is gone. And in the same way, these hopes and dreams that Sansa has for herself will also twist and fade and die. So even though she is in many ways predicting, prophesizing true things, Ned's going to die at the hand of Joffrey. She's going to stay at King's Landing. Joffrey is not a real Baratheon, etc., etc. It's all twisted and wrong and corrupted and terrible and sad. So she's got this prophetic way of thinking about things, but not in the way she's expecting. And as she continues on, it's going to fade more and more and become more and more sad and broken and twisted.
Well, I think it serves the idea you developed just previous to this. And I'm reminded of Trelawney in Harry Potter, where she's making all of these predictions and grand sweeping sentiments, and none of those things come true. But then almost by accident or unaware of her own, there's that moment at the end of Prisoner of Azkaban where her eyes roll back like a shark.
She has an actual prophecy, yeah.
But she doesn't know it. She's not aware of that. When she kind of comes to afterwards, she's not aware of what she said, which everything she said does come true. So there's this idea that I think you kind of laid out before of this accidental prophet.
Right.
This incidental oracle. And I think Sansa's falling into that category, where everything she thinks about and hopes for and wants is wrong. None of that happens. But like you said, almost everything she says does come true. So she spends most of this chapter thinking about her future. I want to be a princess, then I want to be a queen. I need the pretty dress. And she gets pissed when the dress is ruined.
Yep.
And then when she thinks she's going to be taken away from Joffrey, so she won't become princess and then won't become queen. So everything she's thinking about doesn't come true. Everything she's yearning for, none of that happens. But when she wakes up from this dream, the thing she says is Lady. And she will become a lady.
That's
she will
true.
become this Lady of the North.
She'll become the Lady of Winterfell. Yeah.
Yes, this Lady of Winterfell, this basically warden of the North by the end of the story. So she will become what she says.
Right,
but
but it's not what she's intending. Yeah, well, the things that she says that come true are not what she's intending to come true. Again, the biggest one is Joffrey's going to be the one to get the White Hart. Literally, that does not come true. They don't even catch the White Hart. Instead, a boar attacks King Robert and the hunt is cut short. But metaphorically, again, Joffrey will be the one to kill Ned. And then all these other things that she's wanting to come true don't, but it's all this stuff that by accident comes true that she's not meaning to. It's really fascinating.
She's accidentally speaking her future, but she doesn't have the perspective to clock it.
Right, exactly.
But for us, because we have seen the future basically in this world, we know that she's telling her own future here.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And we don't really experience this with other characters. Other characters dream, especially people like Bran and Dany, but it's not like this. Neither of them are really trying to like make a dream come true. None of them are trying to prophesy. They just happen to be these prophetic characters. And we see Arya's had dreams too, but Arya's dreams are really, I think, more a way to just understand how she thinks and what she wants.
It's just the subconscious working in the background.
Right. Yeah. Same with, and like we talked about Ned and Catelyn having these like flashbacks, not really dreams, but more flashbacks, and how that helps them understand the cyclical nature of life and how things happen. But with Sansa, it's like, I think some of the most overtly prophetic way of thinking about things.
Oh, yeah.
Even though she's not this like, you know, quote unquote special character. She's not the prince that was promised. She's not Dany. She's not the three-eyed raven. She's just this random girl, you know, and but she's got this deeply important way of thinking about things and making things happen.
For someone who as someone who usually avoids this whole dream thing, I found this chapter to be the most fruitful and interesting and relatable and rewarding navigation of the topic that we've hit ever.
Yeah.
I think in Game of Thrones, The Witcher, or Lord of the Rings. I got more out of this 5-page discussion of dreams than any of the other ones.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Maybe it is something about that fairy tale logic and the difference between what you say and what you think and all of these moral binaries. I don't know. The way it was calculated and dialed in here, I thought this was fantastic.
It was really, really fun, yeah. And also, speaking of fruitful and fruit, the blood orange plays a really big role in this chapter. And I forgot to mention that's, of course, a continuation of the blood motif we saw in the last Ned chapter. So again, if like...
Distilled, you might say.
Exactly. They're just these clues that I think really tell us to continue thinking about the prophetic things that occurred last chapter and how it's being, you know, shown through Sansa's lens and all of that. So it's like, because I thought to myself, okay, he could have done an orange, he could have done a peach, a strawberry, but he chose a blood orange. Like, that's not insignificant. That's not unintentional. So I was excited by that.
This is also, it feels like our first true kind of sequel chapter, our first real POV chapter where we reflect on events we just saw from a slightly different angle and character's point of view.
Yes, we've got that a little bit with Catelyn and Tyrion.
But that's more of a handoff. There's a baton pass there.
Especially because they're both adults, right? But seeing it through, like, it's another Stark, but it's, you know, a child, it's really interesting. I love Sansa's chapters. I find them so fun.
I don't know. I'm coming around.
Ooh.
I loved this chapter.
Fantastic. I'm glad I'm converting you. Well, thank you very much for listening to our discussion. If you have any thoughts about any of the stuff we discussed or other things that we didn't include, please feel free to comment below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're just listening, you can send us an email, secondbreakfastpod@gmail.com. Or if you're on Patreon, you can comment directly on the Patreon post for this episode. We do a post for every episode. Plus, also, more importantly, we do bonus episodes over on Patreon. Lately, it's been like 2 episodes a month. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more. But it's $2 a month. You can support the show and get access to bonus content, including our whole Fire and Blood series. We talked about that entire book. We did 12 volumes. That was a really, really fun series that we did. So you can check that out over there. Otherwise, anything else? Any other housekeeping?
We just dropped a breakfast buffet.
We did? Yes. Which one was that? Was that volume 11?
Yes.
Okay,
that
volume
one
11.
Was, Dante's Inferno?
Yes. My Old Ass.
I think so.
And it was The Strangers Part 1.
Yes.
That's what it was.
Look at you.
Oh, yeah. Also, as we keep saying, very special announcement coming very, very soon. Just keep an eye out for that. We got a big announcement coming.
Major announcement.
Major announcement. So get thrilled about that. I think that's everything.
Yes, it is. Oh, this past Tuesday, we just dropped an episode on The Substance, which is the most ballsy, gonzo, fantastic, fucked up body horror,
that was a fucking weird
satire,
movie.
Anything we've seen this year. Best theatrical experience of 2024.
Yeah, that was a really fun discussion.
So
check
much
that
fun.
one out.
Please check that out.
Also, we talked about all of House of the Dragon season 2 when it was airing, and
season
1. So check if you want more, Game of Thrones content. You can find it there.
Thank you very much for listening, and we will see you back here on Tuesday with another brand new episode.